You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, Pete and I share some of our video store memories, especially after talking to so many guest friends and fans about their video store memories. We kind of put it all together, share some of our own memories, renting video games, scouring the new release shelves, hovering around the return box to see if someone had returned a movie that you wanted to check out. We talk about all of that and more. Here we go. All right, Pete, as we are apt to do when we go down the rabbit hole, we go deep and we go pretty far.
Rabbits aren't going to chase themselves.
So if it's John Carpenter, 80s 3D movies, or video store memories, we know how to do a deep dive on all the above.
That's why I usually wear a special wetsuit for these occasions, wearing under my clothes right now.
That's just smart. That's just a smart decision right there. We've had so many fun conversations with folks, friends, guests about their video store memories. We've been able to kind of almost replicate the staff recommends, where we've had guests come on and almost like populate their shelf as if they were, they had their own nook in the video store. Alan, John, Scott, Nick, they were able to pick movies that meant something to them, put them on the shelf in the same way that, we maybe stumbled onto a movie that maybe wouldn't have been as obvious to us, but because a Nick and Alan and Scott had it on their staff recommend shelf, we gave it a shot.
Yeah, and we should point out that if you'd like to know more about some of our guests' picks, we've got a bunch of episodes of the podcast out there. You just need to scroll backwards from what you're listening to now. And if you are listening now, we certainly appreciate it. But
some might say, be kind, rewind, Pete.
Some might say that. I won't say it, but some might.
Some might.
Renting video shouldn't be a game of skill or luck, and it's not. At Home Video Express, you'll find over 10,000 videos, including a huge selection of current releases, plus one-day advance reservations and the fastest, friendliest service. So don't worry about missing the movie you want. Check it out. Plus, look in this month's Tacoma News Tribune for coupons that'll get you a year of free movie rentals. And be sure to visit Tacoma's newest superstore at 64th and Pacific during the grand opening celebration October 10th through the 17th.
For every different person that we talk to, everyone has a unique recollection, a very specific nostalgia for their video store memories, but there is a lot of shared DNA within those memories. The artwork, the beaded curtains, there's just something that is part of a specific generation of people who grew up, people like you and me in that era, where if you get in a room with someone and start talking about it, you start hearing some of the same things.
Your memories obviously get skewed and, maybe get a little rough around the edges as you get older. But when you try to place yourself back in that time period when video stores were booming in the mid 80s into the 90s, it just seemed like, that was just how life was. And that's just the way that it was going to be. We're talking about this now, but there's generations of people that have no idea what we're really talking about. They may have like a kind of an understanding of it, but it's something that in retrospect lasted, a fair amount of time. But like the real heyday when it really took off before Blockbuster and Family Video and Hollywood Video like kind of really cornered the market on it. I hesitate to say Wild West. It wasn't like the Wild West, but there was just like a real fond, mom and pop DIY, like filling a niche, filling a market that was like blowing up, and like to kind of grow up in that feels really special because it's now lost to time, really, and it ends up being a very finite moment in time that, like I said, people generations past us don't have any real concept of. Yeah, it's just really interesting. Like it's that snapshot in time, very formative that you can't replicate anywhere else.
The fact that it was it was a finite time where all of these things happen, but they also happen in very formative times in our lives when we were discovering new things and figuring out the world and, what we were going to do, what our place was in it. And here was this hub, this place that just gave you an opportunity to see all these movies. And it sounds romanticized. I think for someone who didn't grow up in that, I think they would almost say we've probably been idealizing it. I think the phrase is like Halion days, that blue, nostalgic, warm glow if someone listened to some of these episodes and didn't share that memory, I wouldn't begrudge them if they said, I think you guys might be looking at this with rose-colored glasses, to which we would say 3D glasses. But I can see how some people may have a little bit of a cynicism in hearing all these people kind of remember this era the same way.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, when you've got all this media at your fingertips literally now, certainly understand the argument or even the perspective of like, how was it better back then? You had to like get on your bike and head to this store that housed movies that maybe the movie you wanted to watch was there, but maybe it wasn't because, especially in the early days, they only had 1 or 2 copies. And if they were rented, then you were out of luck. But I think that speaks to, specifically to those of us that do have those fond, nostalgic, rose-colored feelings and memories of those days. If you went into a store and Revenge of the Ninja was out, then you would scour the walls of VHS boxes to find something that was in.
Ninja Terminator, American Ninja 2.
9 Deaths of the Ninja,
That's right.
Ninja. I mean, more ninja than you can shake a ninja at, but definitely don't shake ninjas. The throwing stars will then fall out of their outfits and clank on the sidewalk, and then that's a violation. So that's one to grow on for you listeners out there. What was I going to say? I completely forgot because I got off.
You had a ninja domination go on.
Actually, I didn't get off. I mean, I went off on a tangent. I didn't get off on a ninja. I'm not, whatever your kink is totally cool. That's not mine though. So I just wanted that to be clarified for posterity's sake.
Revenge of the Ninja, starring martial arts master Sho Kosugi and his son Kane Kosugi, 6-year-old world karate champion. Revenge of the Ninja. The great martial arts explosion of the 80s comes to America with full force. Revenge of the Ninja, rated R.
Bernie, you and I were like such empty vessels, some would argue, still empty vessels. But when we were that age, I look now at like how many movies that you and I have watched collectively. Back then, the canvas was just completely blank. Well, not completely blank, but mostly blank, especially with some of these genres of movies that we really got turned on to at that age. And it was just like a kid in a candy store, really. There's just a great period of discovery.
And also, I think the other part, too, that, again, it seems unique to this era, in some ways might echo some of the things we're seeing now. I'm going to try to maybe connect these two things for someone who's listening, and they've already feel like this conversation is way too esoteric for them. But we're growing up. We're in our formative teenage years. You have VHS as a format that's popped on the scene, and you have these mom and pop stores that have empty shelves. So then you have people like Charles Band. You have distributors that pop up out of the woodwork basically to fulfill the demand. And the supply isn't always Raiders of the Lost Ark. Sometimes you get Treasure of the Four Crowns, right? They're all like Raiders, but they're not Raiders. And we knew that. But if they had good cover art and it was interesting enough, we would do it because it was also a time when we're like, oh my God, there's just new movies coming out all the time. And we have some movies that we can immediately go to over and over again. Movies like Goonies, Flight of the Navigator, like those movies that we're like, oh yeah, these are great. But yeah, we'll also give movies like, thinking of Charles Band, like Eliminators.
Mandroid. Mercenary. Scientist. Ninja.
Hold on.
They are about to embark on the most perilous journey anyone has ever undertaken. And when they reach their destination, they face the most awesome power on Earth. Each one is the ultimate specialist. Together they are Illuminators, rated PG.
Yeah, I'm willing to give that a shot. It seems like fun. And I'm wondering if, because we grew up at that period, it's not that similar now where you have all these streaming services. So you have things like Asylum that pop up and litter the landscape with piranha versus armadillo versus, spiked hedgehog. And we see 80 permutations of that because you also need that and Hallmark movies and action movies and comedies for Peacock and Roku and Tubi and Netflix and Paramount Plus. In some ways, a digital landscape for what we were seeing. The difference is those were shelves. Now they're thumbnails.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really given that a ton of thought, but yeah, you're right. There's never going to be enough content, right? So there's always going to be entrepreneurial people out there that are going to see an avenue or a lane to be like, there's a need to be filled here. There's another streaming service is populating, and here's a way for us to get some stuff in there. We can churn out some down and dirty movies that, yeah, maybe they're knockoffs and maybe they're super low budget and maybe they're terrible, or maybe they're so bad they're good, but we can get that in there, and then that's a discovery for someone else. And who are we to judge, because we've seen a lot of questionable films. So yeah, I think that's the beauty of being at an age when you're discovering a lot of new things, right? Like, we're talking about VHS and video stores because that was a very formative part of our lives, but it may not be video stores for this generation, but it's something else. And whatever that is awesome, because they're going to have that imprinted, in their personality, and they're going to carry that with them the rest of their lives. And 20 years, 30 years from now, they'll be waxing poetic about something that, generations beyond them are going to be like, huh? What? You did what?
You remember when Netflix used to deliver these DVDs in the mail? Oh my God, you're so old.
But I do want to be kind of rewind real quick just to make the point that you brought up. I don't think it can be stated directly enough, like how much selling those cover art of those VHS boxes did, and whether they were transferred movie posters or they were created specifically for the market. Like, how many movies did you rent just based off of the cover art, and maybe reading a little bit off of the back of like, okay, I'm sold, that you might otherwise never have even thought twice about.
There's got to be a phrase for like wide-eyed disappointment, where you just knew this was not going to live up to it. There was a complete understanding between you, the filmmaker, the distributor, whoever did the cover art. This movie will not look like this cover. And if you got lucky, maybe you get a few stills in the back to, flush out the fact that this was all shot like in an abandoned warehouse. But you know what? That cover art with its airbrushing and the neon and the colors were enough to make you wonder, this cover won't fulfill the promise, but if it's like 40%, 50%, then this will be an entertaining 93 minutes.
Yeah. And I liken it to, and I don't know if this is unique to people that maybe have more of a wild imagination or creative bent that you and I did growing up, but I liken it to when I was a kid. I had like a subscription to Marvel Star Wars comics.
If you're looking for adventure this summer, escape with Marvel Comics. Fight crime with Spider-Man, meet the Fantastic Four, and watch Captain America in action. May the Force be with you as you battle the evil empire in Star Wars. Discover the secrets of the South American jungle in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And with Marvel Comics, you're never alone, because they can go with you in the car or to the park, even on a rainy day. Marvel Comics are your ticket to fun and adventure this summer.
I'd get like these 70s and early 80s issues, and even if it was like Spider-Man or whatever that I came across, but there was always like this ad for this. It was like a Foot Locker full of army men, and I was obsessed with it just from like this really rudimentary, drawn sketch that had, that was just selling me on that. Like, you get 26 bombers, you get 2 destroyers, you get 100. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get all these army men, and it comes in a Foot Locker. Not reading the fine print of like how big the Foot Locker was. And then I badgered my mom to like get me this. I'm like, you don't understand. This is going to be the greatest thing. I'm going to play with this forever. It's going to be the greatest gift. And, to my mom's credit, she relented and she got it. I remember it was like super cheap. It was like $1.99. It was in so many comic books. So I think a lot of people out there of a certain age would remember this. Tons of red flags that, my 7-8-year-old self just like, like, red flags, what are those? I want army men. And I remember it arriving, and it was like the size of a box of animal crackers. I remember taking it out, and it was just like this thin plastic, and I was like, all right, well, yeah. So sorry to digress on my childhood trauma, but that's what I liken it to. Like, you pick some of these movies, you're sold by the box, and then you hit play, and what you have envisioned in your head doesn't quite play out on screen. But like you said, Bernie, like if it's given you 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% of that,
Ooh,
like
those are big numbers.
yeah, I'm casting a wide net here, but your brains kind of will fill in the rest and be like, okay. And back then, I struggled to remember a ton of movies that even at the time I was like, this movie is a real piece of shit. There was a few of them, like we've talked about.
And I know it's not Star Wars. I know it's a Star Crash, but you know what? It has David Hasselhoff and Carolyn Monroe and some stop motion robots that are certainly not C-3PO and R2-D2 and space battles and guys with green makeup and Christopher Plummer for like 5 minutes. I'll be fine with this. And maybe their alien helmets are just motorcycle helmets painted chrome, but you know what? That's fine.
It works.
The supreme galactic spectacle. Star Crash. You will be blasted through the blackness of 100 million nights into an incredible universe of fantastic sights and sounds beyond your wildest dreams. Star Crash, rated PG.
I was curious if you possibly remember the first movie that you ever rented.
I have a very specific memory, maybe not the first, but one of the first. So if you'll accept that.
Hold on. Yeah, okay. We're good with that.
Thank you. Judges are very gracious today. Thank you, judges. The two that I remember was one, and we'll have to, there's a kind of like a Letterman style top 10 list that I have is kind of like this bookend to this conversation about video store memories that we'll get to. This will come up in this top 10 is I remember renting Slalom for NES. Man, I could not move my thumbs at that time because I was playing that game all weekend trying to get every penny that I could out of the rental. Like rent it on a Friday so I could return it Sunday. So that means I had Friday night, all day Saturday, early Sunday, drop it off Sunday evening, Sunday like late afternoon. Very vivid memory that I have. Going into the video store, looking at the case, being enamored by the colors. This looks like it's Psych Bike, but for skiing. So that rental memory is very vivid. Movie-wise, Highlander 2.
500 years later, the hunt for the immortals begins again.
Greetings, Highlander. You cold?
Highlander 2, The Quickening.
Let's have some fun. Rated R.
Now, Quay.
Again, with a lot of these movies, what to you was picks, to me was either WGN or the Fox affiliate in the Chicagoland area where I grew up. Every Saturday at 5, they would play Terminator, Die Hard, Flight of the Navigator, or something like Highlander, but it was always the TV edit. So opening the doors to a video store, it's like, whoa, there are scenes in these movies that I have not seen before. Wait, they made a sequel to this? Well, this hasn't gotten to WGN yet, so let me go check this out. And being slightly disappointed, but also discovering that there was also another world of movies that were available. This is great. So Highlander 2, very clear memory, and Slalom for my first rental memories. Maybe not first for both, but really vivid.
Nice. I was racking my brain. I don't think I'm going to have the exact first one because I was trying to place when we got our VCR. And the best I can guess was probably like around 84, pretty early, right before the big boom, because I was trying to remember like the boxes that I was looking at the first video store we had a membership to. I feel like it was in like a converted like office building. So like the way that they just kind of reconfigured a layout. But again, like this is what people were doing back then.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, early days. So, I don't remember like a new release section. It was just, I think at that point, it was like whatever they could get their hands on in terms of copies of videos. And it was, they were on line the walls of the store. I think I narrowed it down. I definitely remember my brother and I just trying to decide between Enter the Ninja and Revenge of the Ninja. And we thought, again, the box for Revenge of the Ninja looked cooler. and you're reading something like, oh, this guy Sho Kosugi sounds like he's like awesome martial artist. We got to do that, as opposed to Franco Nero and Enter the Ninja, which finally seeing that, I'm like, oh, this guy doesn't know martial arts at all.
No, but he will wink at you a lot.
He'll wink at you. Yeah.
Enter the Ninja, master of ninjutsu, the martial art that surpasses kung fu, karate, and jujitsu.
You want ninja. I.
I don't like to be followed. Why don't we talk?
Ninjutsu, the supreme martial art.
But I don't think that was the first one. I'm going to guess that the first movie we rented, because I know it was an early one, and I know that we rented it. It was like a family watch. It was a movie called Bug.
The bug lives. The bug grows.
The Parmiterras will eat only raw meat.
A terror so real it will make your skin crawl, your heart pound, and your soul scream for release from the bug. Rated PG.
It was like a late 70s kind of creature feature. Is like an earthquake in California that unleashes like these fire-starting cockroaches from the earth. Bradford Dillman is this tortured scientist who then breeds it with a cockroach, and then they turn like super intelligent. They can fly, and it's like it gets a little crazy. But it creeped me out as a kid because I, to this day, don't really like cockroaches. I think I'm probably in the majority there. So with all the bug work in this movie, it was just like giving me the ick factor the whole time. So there's a lot of that going on. Watch it now. It's a pretty goofy movie, but early 80s when we rented it, it definitely creeped me out a little bit. And just the premise is a good one. Definitely remember sitting in the basement with our 2-ton color television down there, popping it into the early VCR that we had. I think it was a JVC. That was around the start of it. So if it wasn't the first one, it was one of the first rentals that we did.
Got to change your perspective on movies when you get to actually have a movie that gives you that ick factor, but you don't get to walk out of the theater. It's sitting there in your VCR. You have to like rewind it. You have to take it out. Like there's something tangible about that where you don't get to have that disconnect. Like I don't like cockroaches, and this movie represents this thing that I don't like now. Now I have to like take it back to the people that I gave money to see this to. There's something again, like even those mechanics when you were talking about like the shelves and these early mom and pops, form is function. Let's put it the way a library would be with books. That starts informing the need for a very captivating cover. And then there's a market for that because a good cover could sell the movie. Then how do you put them? You put them next to each other. Well, what should we have first? I don't know, new releases, things that are new so people can see those things. And then, and you start thinking about how this stuff, you kind of take it for granted, maybe overthinking it a little bit. Yeah, it was a bit of the wild, wild west. And that's why you could go into a gas station and rent a movie. Right. You could go to a grocery store, or you could go to a legitimate mom and pop, and they would all look different.
Yeah.
Now that 7-Eleven has the best movie deals, everybody's becoming a critic.
Silverado is a cinematic tour de force, don't you find?
It's a poetic blazing saddle.
It's the new wave in Western. Anybody. 7-Eleven has all the top hits 24 hours a day.
You know, there's a photodynamic restraint to Rambo that you meet.
And the price?
Universal spent $22 million on this, baby.
And you get it for peanuts.
Nobody has better movie deals than 7-Eleven.
At the time, it was like $100 for like a yearly membership. And you talk about DIY. I distinctly remember this first video store that we had the membership to. It was like someone just took some plywood and built like the makeshift wall. But then literally it was just they took string and just strung it across to keep the boxes from tipping over and falling on the floor. How awesome is that? There was no template. This was like, again, like such early days. They were just kind of figuring out how it goes. Like people were smart enough to be like, I think this could kind of be a big thing. So let's get in on it. Then from there, it exploded.
And you knew the value and how good the selection was going to be based on how many sun-faded old movie posters they had.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course.
All over, and how many layers thick those were, where you're like, if I go underneath, this is a poster for Poltergeist, but if I go underneath that, it's a poster for Friday the 13th, and you just keep going. You're like, wow, they've just been throwing poster on top of poster on top of that drywall.
Now, did your video store, like, did the owner or the people working there, were you able to rent R-rated movies, or were they policing that at all?
Not at all. No qualms about letting children see boobs and blood. No problem.
Yeah, say Unreal Video is the same. Like, we would go there by ourselves without my parents all the time, and I don't even think we had membership cards. They just, we were in the system, and they knew us because we were there all the time. So yeah, we could rent whatever we wanted, like, no problem. I will say, going back to this first one, my brother and I think it was more me than my brother, but I wanted to rent. They had like a small little music section, and they had a video. Duran Duran had a video of all their videos released to that point. And again, this is like 84, 85. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I get to see all their videos, and went to bring it up to the counter. I was with my mom, and the owner actually said, and I can't believe, I guess he had seen it, or at least someone had made mention of it to him, that we were not allowed to rent it because the video for Girls on Film was the uncensored video, and there was breasts in it. And we were, he was making the judgment call that we were too young. It was the correct judgment call.
I'm sure for every Pete that was denied that, there was someone who looked just old enough, Pete, a little older than you, that maybe got to see that uncut video.
One day I'll be able to rent that.
One day. That's a perfect lead-in to this like Letterman-style top 10 things that we've heard from folks. First one, expensive tapes, and how in the early days, tapes were $70 to $100. I remember that experience of wanting to buy Batman Returns, and the guy just being like, "Hey, it's $100," and I'm like, "What did you say? Are you nuts? Like, I think I paid you $2 or $3 for like a day or two. It cost me $75. So hey, I'm gonna make some money off you." Was the Duran Duran one the one that you were trying to buy, and then you saw what the price was, and like, oh, or was it Talking Heads, or what?
No, it was U2's Rattle and Hum.
There we go. And you had that same experience.
I saved my money up, and I did actually end up buying it, and that one was a bargain because that was $50.
I promised to treat the gang to a movie tonight. But have you seen the prices at the box office? That's why I love Instant Replay video cassettes. They've got all my favorite movies on cassette and video disc, and Rent-A-Beta for just $8.95 a night. Golly, talk about saving money.
On Folsom at 34th and in the Courtyard on Freeport Boulevard.
Well, Rochester, before you hook up the Rent-A-Beta, be sure to heat up last week's popcorn.
Seems like everyone we talked to talking about like the faded posters, the way the stores were set up, everything was unique. Different stores, obscure titles, things that were only available in some stores, things that weren't available in the big chain stores. Like you talked about how, you try to get Faces of Death with your cousin Mark. Well, that wasn't happening at Blockbuster because they would never even carry Faces of Death. But at a mom and pop shop, you had a fighting chance.
Oh, absolutely. Going back, walking myself through Unreal Video again, and this was a very tiny store. It was pretty narrow. They didn't have a ton of inventory. They had the walls were covered, and I was trying to remember what was at the front of the store because I spent literally no time there. Like the horror section was on its way in on the left side, right before you got to the counter. Then next to the counter was the beaded curtain into the adult room. But at the front of the store when you walked in, which was a lot brighter because that was where the window was shining in, that had to be the drama section, which, when I was 10, 11, 12, I wanted no part of it.
No interest in that. No, that's
never spent any time. My sneakers never dented the carpeting in that.
That's right.
On the venue store.
You're like Steel Magnolias. I want some Steel Justice. That's what I'm talking about.
Want to go out for a movie and a gourmet treat?
You can't afford that kind of entertainment.
Bet your dollar.
Hey, this is the warehouse.
Very good. Now rent a movie. Every one is just $1 a day each.
So that's why you bet me the $1.
Well, I did pay for the gourmet popcorn.
Big spender.
This $1-a-day video features great movie entertainment from The Warehouse, where all beta and VHS movies are just $1 a day each. And visit our newest stores in Mesa, 35th Avenue and Thunderbird, and West Camelback.
Adult sections. That's something that has come up. Between that and late fees, the resounding story is that the adult section kind of accounted for a significant portion of the revenue for a lot of these stores. And I think even more so for mom and pop stores, because Blockbusters, Hollywood, family videos never had any beads or curtains to speak of.
It's an economic engine. It should be recognized as such.
We've had a few episodes with staff recommends. That's part of that local flavor, is that if you went to even the big chain stores, they would typically have a staff recommend section. And I think at a time when, we talk about streaming and thumbnails and that kind of paralysis where you could almost spend more time trying to figure out what to watch than actually just watching something, the staff recommends section was a nice way to kind of like, hey, here's what my tastes are. And if you have a good connection, a personal connection to this, then you might like what I like. The original algorithm, if we talk about like how online stuff works now, I just want to see what Steve likes, because it turns out Steve likes Akira and John Woo's Hard Boiled. So I'm willing to give a movie that he recommends a shot.
For your viewing needs, come to Barry's Video with 3 locations. Our friendly staff can help you choose from over 10,000 movies.
Family movies, as well as the latest releases, are only $2 each or 3 for $5. For your convenience, Barry's Video carries multiple copies of those most popular titles, plus a weekly drawing for 10 free movie rentals. Remember Barry's Video for VCR rentals, camcorder rentals, even TVs. Your 20th rental is free at Barry's Video, 2315C Jordan Lane. Other locations at Hazelland Square and Old Madison Pike.
Limited copies. I think that's something that we've heard a lot about, talking about how they might have 100 copies of Independence Day. But, when you get to some of those cult classics, you might only have 1 copy, if that. And you're literally at the mercy of the person before you that rented it that might have taken it for an extra night or two. And you're like, hey, I need to see my Prince of Darkness. So I got to get my John Carpenter fix on. It's like, oh, well, that person's not bringing it in till tonight. Okay, well, then maybe I'll just hang out a little bit and like watch you when you do the drop in and be a little creepy and see if, that person dropped it off so I can pick it up.
It's funny. I was just going to ask you if you ever did the loitering.
No, 100%.
I'm back with it.
100%.
The owner was like, yeah, it's due back today and it's got to be in by 5. And it's like, yeah, it's 3:00. I could probably look at VHS boxes for 2 hours.
That's right. And every little kerplunk that you would hear in the drop-off bin, a little bit of hope. Well, maybe that's Predator 2. Oh, I don't know. I'm going to wait. Maybe. And then it's like, no, it's Dead Poet Society. Okay. Well, we've got Dead in the title. We're getting closer to Predator 2. All right. Like, this is going to happen soon. I'm going to watch Danny Glover very soon. That'll be fine. Club fees. I think that's something that not everyone has had the same experience with, but you and I have, where some places didn't have just a rental fee, but there was a club fee. And, it was not insignificant. You maybe pay $100 for the year. And then on top of that, you'd pay the rental. And I think, when we think about buying a movie for $75, $100, and you're thinking of mom and pops, I think that fee on their end was probably a small fee to help with the high cost of purchasing and like store operations. If you had especially a full-fledged store, so you have 100 people dropping $100 each, that lets you buy a lot of movies and starts filling in the empty shelves.
For sure. And, I was thinking about this too. It's an interesting economic model to kind of go with the, we can't really afford to have like 10 copies of Independence Day or whatever. So we have 1 copy of all this stuff. And that's what at my video store, I don't really, maybe they had 2 copies of some real new release. But from what I remember, there was only like 1 copy. And there was like a green tab that was in a slot in front of the box. And if the tab was there, the movie was in. So you took the tab up to the counter. They pulled the tape, put it in one of the clear plastic clamshell, and off you go. So, I remember, again, walking in with friends, and if they didn't have 4 or 5 movies that we wanted to see, we would always find something else. It wasn't a case of like, going to Blockbuster where, you just have like that endless wall of like the new releases, and it's all like empty because the real new releases were almost always sold out unless you got there at the right time. But we didn't really care about any of that stuff. Like, we'd go in, if something wasn't in, we'd move on to find something else. And I think that's, like we were talking earlier, there was like this, for us, there was this period of discovery. So, I don't even, maybe once in a while we'd go in with a plan of like what we really wanted to rent. But other than that, like, we were going to browse, and then it was just going to pick what was available. And it was never a case of like, this is the only thing. It was always like 4 or 5 movies that we were trying to choose from. And, maybe we had enough money to rent 2 of them if it was going to be like a weekend sleepover or something like that. But it seemed to be less of a big deal. Like if a store was only having 1 copy, there wasn't like a huge outcry, at least earlier on in the 80s. Maybe that changed, as they felt the pressure coming in from places like Blockbuster and in Hollywood Video that had those, tons of extra copies. And maybe that's one of the reasons that led to, unfortunately, the demise of most of the mom and pop stores as the 80s and 90s went on.
With National Video's Movie Mate package, anyone can see their favorite movies for peanuts. Because for just $9.95, you get our Movie Mate video player for your TV and any 2 movies. We even throw in $90 of free coupons and a bag of popcorn. It's a jumbo value, so why not share a Movie Mate with your loved ones? Swing by National Video and see what you've been missing.
You're guaranteed a better buy at National Video.
You mentioned affordability, and I think something that has not necessarily come up in our conversations with folks, but that I think when I think about access and availability, finances, and how a lot of these stores not only rented movies, but they rented hardware. They would rent a VCR. They would rent a video game system. And I remember, early days, we were not well off. And while we had a VHS, a VCR, we were able to get VHS. But I do remember renting a Nintendo Entertainment System early on. That was my entry point to trying to be able to, during recess at school, have a conversation with everyone else who maybe already had a system. Even though I only had it for a weekend, it allowed me to play it, albeit temporarily. And those things required high deposit, $100, because you had this thing in a suitcase, that,
yeah, I forgot about that.
You're getting an NES, you're getting the controllers, and you're trying to keep it in pristine shape because your parents are hovering over you, being like, well, I just gave them $100 or gave them my credit card information, and they're going to keep that on file. And that thing comes back with a dent or a ding, they're going to charge me for it. So you keep that in good shape. And that's something that I think about when you mention affordability. Again, something we haven't talked about, but something that made these movies accessible to people who maybe couldn't afford a VHS or a VCR or NES.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to say rentals were either $1.99 or $2.99. And then maybe you'd have a special day, one day would be $1 rental or something like that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If you think $2 can't buy you much entertainment anymore, take a look at what Errol's Video Club members are watching tonight. Trading Places, War Games, Michael Jackson's Thriller, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Tootsie. Membership is just $15 and lets your whole family enjoy some of the finest video entertainment available anywhere. Over 1,600 titles, each for rent at just $2 the first night and only $1 each extra night. Visit any of the convenient Errol's Video Clubs soon, or look for our ad in the post.
I'm trying to remember if my parents ever gave us money to go or if it was just stuff that we would just scrounge up whatever money we had laying around because we could. It wasn't cost prohibitive for us as kids to pop in and do a $2.99 rental, especially if you're there with a couple of friends. Everyone chips in 50 cents and you're good to go. And, then you have yourself a little Friday the 13th marathon at Mike Cognato's house.
Nice. I mean, it reminds me a lot of times going to Venture, Zayre, Woolworth, Kmart. Your regional mileage may vary on whether any of these stores were anywhere around you, but begging my mom for some quarters at a Kmart so I could go play Turtles in Time or Heavy Barrel. And then also by that same token, well, if she gave me 4 quarters, well, I'll play 2, but I'll save the other 2 quarters because then next time I go to the video store, they're going to have that 99-cent or $1 rentals. And if I can do this over the course of twice a month or something, I've got $1. And now maybe I can rent RoboCop because that's already been rented to death. And they're like, okay, well, for 99 cents, this can be yours for one night. And I'm like, I've got 99 cents. I'd pay $1 for that. That's the RoboCop joke there for people. I'd buy that for $1. Because they were a hub for all things cinema. When I would go to, especially mostly Blockbusters, to be fair, versus mom and pops, it also gave me an opportunity to pick up movie magazines, Entertainment Weekly, Rue Morgue, Horror Hound, Fangoria. You never really saw those in mom and pop stores, but that was at a time when, again, I'm getting to know, I feel the world through movies. A lot of my adolescence felt like the intro to Cable Guy. if you've ever seen that. Like I was kind of plopped in front of a TV.
Yeah.
A lot of my understanding of the world came through that. And, that probably says a lot more about me than anything else. But being able to understand the world as best as I could through these movies, I wanted to know more about how they were made and the people that were making them. And if I was at Blockbuster renting something like Independence Day or Predator 2, and then I would see Entertainment Weekly, that would get me through that week because it was my Bible. Oh my God, they're making another Indiana Jones and his dad's going to be in it. This is amazing. It allowed me to kind of look behind the curtain and be like, there's this whole industry that makes these things. Man, that would be cool to be a part of that. And some of these magazines, along with the movies, were part of that mom and pop world.
I do remember those being in Blockbuster. Definitely do not remember the mom and pop video store having the magazines. I think it was probably too small. And I'll throw out another blast from the past name because where I got most of my magazines from, I'd go to the mall and there would be a bookseller right as you walked into one of the entrances of the Smith Haven Mall. And I love books, so I could spend hours in a bookstore, and I would just kind of move up and down the magazine racks as well. And, Star Wars Insider, and, every so often I'd pick up an issue of Fangoria, Entertainment Weekly. Yeah, like you said, like I never really was like sold on like one specific magazine. It was usually, again, like if it looked like it had some articles in there that were, hitting me, in my interest zone, then I would pick it up.
Suncoast always had that too, where sometimes those were like polybagged, and it was like, oh man, I can't look at this magazine, or like Filmscape or Film Facts. I think it was one of those $10 or $12 magazine, but it was thick, 11 by 14 in size. It was substantial. It would have amazing pictures, behind the scenes stuff that you'd never see anywhere else. And that's where you hear names like Stan Winston and Rick Baker, and you're like, I don't know who these people are, but now that I see them in the credits of these movies, oh shit, these are the people that make these things. This is cool. And that helped you, at least it helped me connect those dots.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't have that pull that you did. I think my interest in the behind the scenes stuff came later, where I became like really fascinated by it. But at the time I was just wrapped up in like these worlds, and with my imagination, I was like really heavily invested. Like I said, like to see a goofy movie like Bug and be like freaked out by it, even though I was younger, that was just my imagination completely like going wild, and like feel like there was like this veil between understanding that it was a movie, but at the same time being like, well, maybe this could happen for real. Like it was always like that. There was just enough there.
That's your imagination kind of being like this, you could almost see yourself in that world.
Oh, and I would do that all the time. I would put myself in the shoes of the protagonist of some movie, like, like I'm going to save this is what I would do to save the day in this particular.
When you're a major star, you do things in a big way. Big cars, big house,
Big ego.
big ego. So when I want a movie, I want a big selection. No. I mean really big. Like at Major Video.
Here's big news for kids. Nintendo, loaded with surprises. Nintendo, packed with punch. Nintendo. Now rent a wide variety of Nintendo games at Major Video, the Super Video Store.